Highside, Lowside, Season 2, Episode 4, blah, 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 Scene 2, ABC, Take 3.
You said blah, blah, blah. This is our paid professional.
Spurgeon here, welcome you to the newest episode of Highside, Lowside. On the couch, I've got our regular contributor, Mr. Bearded Joe, and we've got somebody special for you today, Lance Silver Fox Oliver. Lemmy is just on a much-deserved vacation. Do not fear, he will be back next week. He just gets a bit curmudgeon-y in the wintertime. Now, for those of you that don't know who Lance is, he is the man behind RevZilla's Common Tread magazine. How long has it been now? Almost 6 years?
Almost 6 years since we launched Common Tread.
Man, oh
So
man.
many words.
Lance is joining us on the couch today because our topic is going to be breaking down the best motorcycles we've seen from 2019 while also taking a look forward into what's coming for 2020. And if you're not familiar with Lance, he was actually our guest interview on the last podcast. Is that not correct, Joseph?
That's totally correct. So if you need some more of this action for your
and
ears.
Who doesn't, really?
Great for your drive to work or to your races or motorcycle shows or whatever you're going to do this winter. Go to wherever you usually get your podcast and type in RevZilla. You'll see the Highside, Lowside podcast. In addition to our regular show that we do here, we have interviews with interesting folks like Lance, and we also have viewer comments. So we go back through some of our previous episodes and harvest some interesting questions and comments from you viewers, and we go ahead and rap about that on the podcast. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I think we actually have some specific comments for you today, Lance. Readers and viewers that want to know more about just how you spend your life. So we're gonna dive into all that, so let's go ahead and get started. Question 1. If each of you had a blank check for your favorite release in 2019, what bike would you buy?
Well, if you're going to give me a blank check, if I'm spending your money, then I'm going to go buy something that I would really like to have, but I wouldn't buy myself. So my choice is going to be a Zero SRF. First of all, I love electric motorcycles.
If you love them so much, why don't you own one?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Why are you spending my money on one?
Because you're offering it. So I love electric motorcycles. I like riding them. I like the simplicity of them. I think they're the perfect solution for two-wheel urban transportation. I like the fact, as a person who doesn't really enjoy tinkering and doing maintenance in the garage, I love the low maintenance aspect. But I'm conflicted because my cheap side doesn't want to pay $19,000 as a starting price for the SRF. And although I feel it really did advance the electric motorcycle offerings this year, I think it's significant for that reason. But it's still a lot to pay for what's basically just a one-use kind of vehicle.
So out of all the bikes out there, out of all the electric bikes out there, the Zero is the one that you, if blank check, that's the one you want.
I think it makes the most sense. Okay. I mean, we have the Harley Livewire coming out, but that's another $10,000 on top of that.
Wow.
And I'm not that free even with your money. So, so I think the SRF has got
nice.
Very usable range. It's really powerful. It looks good. I think it's a good electric motorcycle. It's a good alternative.
The problem that I have with the electric bike market right now, and I like the idea of the electric bike, but it's exactly what you said. It's very limited in its use. I think that there's 3 areas that the electric market will take off. Urban mobility, I think, is one, and you nailed that. I think that if you're just using this to commute in the city back and forth,
That's
I think
what
it's
they're perfect
fantastic.
For. Perfect.
The other 2 areas that I think you're gonna see it succeed in. Off-road dirt riding, because like we've seen so many of these motocross track parks get shut down because of they build homes right up to them, and then the homeowners are like, oh, I don't like the noise. It's like, well, whose fault is that? But I do think that if we're all running electric bikes, then that can be avoided. And then also street racing, same thing with racetracks, right? Like I think that for a lot of these more aggressive sport bikes, if you're just doing a track day, you can have an electric bike. You can go out, you can rip around, for 15 minutes in a session on a track, come back, plug it in, 45 minutes later, go back out again.
I agree with you on the first 2. I have doubts about the other one, but that's a separate topic.
Well, that's a separate topic. Now I want to know. Maybe you should write an article for Common Tread. I can
honestly
read all about
think-
it.
Maybe so. Yeah.
I think if there was a company out there, like one of the ones that do the electric indoor go-kart tracks that offered like electric supermoto bikes for a go-kart track indoors,
There you go.
that would be
Now you're
killer.
thinking.
Like, I would be there every weekend.
Well, they're doing that in Europe.
Oh,
We
Well,
yeah.
Europe, they have the
Yeah.
indoor
Yeah.
motocross.
Right.
I've seen
We
indoor
had,
motocross.
we had an article in Common Tread about that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
They've been
Yeah.
they actually, and that's the other thing too. Like, could you imagine in Philadelphia where it's wintertime, you could take your dirt bike and just after work
Ride
with like
indoors,
giant
yeah.
lights, and it goes until midnight.
Oh,
You could
yeah.
just spend like 6 to midnight just
Yeah.
riding your dirt bike. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
The machine that I would buy with your money, my favorite one was the new Speed Twin. I got to spend some time riding that bike, and the Speed Twin is one of those sleepers. Like, it's a little brawler. Like the new 1200 motor is so fun. Like, it makes a great sound. It makes tons of torque. And for a retro bike, it has all the stuff you'd want, like great brakes. I know you were bummed out about it doesn't have an upside down fork on it.
So it wasn't the upside down fork. It was just for the money. I would agree with you up until the suspension.
Yeah, but it's only like, I don't even think it's 13 grand, So
But it's almost 13 grand, and it doesn't have any adjustment to the suspension.
But it's almost a 100 horsepower vintage looking bike.
But it doesn't, like, all I want is, like, for that kind of money, I think that would have been a knock out the park. Take my check, I'll buy one of these, because I did like it. And there was, like, out of all the bikes that you and I were riding, we were just down in Texas together and we were riding a bunch of Triumphs, and like, I was very impressed with that bike. That 1200 engine, that's the same one I believe from the Scramblers, and,
Right.
and it's tuned a little bit differently, and
high power.
It's just it's a great bike, but I do think that the suspension was a little bit lacking for me.
I wasn't able to exceed the ability of the suspension on the motorcycle.
And maybe that's because you're also about 60, 70 pounds lighter than I am too.
Whoa.
You're a svelte young man.
No, I mean, I just had a blast on that bike. That to me was kind of a surprise, because I don't think that I would have considered that machine unless I got to spend some time riding it, and it was really pretty killer.
So I think my pick for this category, and it's hard because I'm thinking blank check. You automatically want to go out and buy the most expensive thing out there because you're like, you want to get your money's worth if I have a free money to use. But honestly, the bike that really stuck with me throughout this entire year was Kawasaki Z400. You talk about mobile, transportation. You talk about a fun bike to rip around on the weekends.
Can you handle all that power, though?
I mean, I couldn't when it was a Ninja 400. I laid that down on the track this year, so I did.
Maybe the bike just couldn't handle all your power.
Yeah, I did.
That's what it was.
I did do some damage to our Ninja 400 this year with a Lowside, but I mean, it held up pretty well considering.
It really did. It was
considering I
just
crashed it.
cosmetic.
Yeah, I would get the Z400, the Olin suspension, and then different levers, and then a heavier clutch spring. That's probably all I would do to that bike, and then I would ride the snot out of it.
Yeah, that was really a fun bike.
Yeah, so I think, when I originally was looking at putting these questions together, I was like trying to think of something big and fancy that I wanted to blow a bunch of money on, but realistically, like, I could ride that bike around in a lot of different scenarios and have a lot of fun.
You're so conservative when you're spending someone else's money.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the Z400 and the Ninja 400 is the sort of the ecosystem that's growing up around those bikes, all the things that are available in the aftermarket.
Yes.
Because that Ninja 400, I mean, it's the bike to have in World Supersport 300 racing. It's the bike that totally dominated Moto America Liqui Moly Junior Cup. And it's being used by amateur racers at racetracks. It's being used for track days. So all of this stuff is coming in. People are making parts for it, aftermarket ways to improve it, and use it for different kinds of things. So it's got its own ecosystem building up around it, which makes it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny because that bike's only been out. The Ninja 400's only been out for a little over, not even quite 2 years yet. And you look at everything that's available, and the beauty of that, because there is so many shared components, that a lot of that trickles right to the Z400. But
exactly.
So that would be my bike for 2019. I already put the card down. I was about to put question 2 card down too. But let's move on to the second question, which is, was there anything that you didn't get excited about, but you felt was important for the industry? Who wants to go first?
Well, I haven't really picked specific motorcycles for this, but it's kind of just a shift in the industry overall. I've been seeing carburetors and kickstarters vanishing off of dirt bikes like nobody's business. And being a dirt biker, that's kind of terrifying. So, I think...
Terrifying how?
Well, there's definitely been plenty of scenarios when the E-Start on some of these enduro bikes that we ride are not working 40, 50 miles into the forest. So while you could sometimes bump start them, now we're looking at all these EFI bikes that need a fuel pump to turn on. If the battery's dead or something's going on with that and it can't turn the fuel pump on, it doesn't matter if you're trying to push start it or anything like that. It's not going to go. So, I understand that a lot of the, the move towards fuel injection is due to emissions and things like that. A lot of the races we do are closed course anyway. So, historically, closed course competition machines didn't have to meet all these EPA standards and things like that.
So I will say the one thing that I can give, and I'll give a real world example of this. I had just put that Baja Designs headlight in my 350, and we were out in Moab. So a bunch of my friends and I, we drove out to Moab, and we're riding through the desert, and I kept just hitting the kill switch. But when I was hitting the kill switch, I had this brand new Baja Designs headlight in high beam mode, just draining my battery. So we got to the top of this single track gnarly section, and I'm looking down at my buddies below, and like one's laying over on the side, the other one's trying to climb down the mountain to help them up, and it was like, okay, great, I'm gonna let these people get down first, and then I'm gonna go down, and I went to start the bike, and it was dead. So I was like, but I was able to, put it in gear, second gear, pop it, and it started back up again. Now,
So
I
you
don't
had
know if
enough
it was
juice for
because
the
it
fuel
had
pump.
just enough juice to activate the fuel pump, but not enough to kick it over.
Right.
But that was one of those situations where I was still able to bump start it, even though my bike is fuel injected without a kicker. But
Right.
if things had gone just a little bit worse, I could have been in a pretty bad spot.
Well, also the other thing to consider is, carburetors are so simple, but they're so stout. Everything is made of metal. You know what I mean? So even if a carburetor gets clogged up or whatever like that, you could pull the bowl off of it on the side of the trail and clean it out and, reset and you could change the jetting really easily. Like I had some tuning issues with my bike when I first got it, but literally like 15 minutes of messing with the carburetor, now it runs perfect. So the thing that I've been seeing in a lot of the hard enduro guys, the Red Bull, World Enduro Super Series, things like that, they have to run the most modern machines, to represent the company. So I'm seeing rocks bashing these plastic fuel line fittings off of the gas tanks and things like that. To train all year and to travel around the world to have some simple plastic part break and disable the bike completely is such a drag.
You don't even have to travel around the world. I know Lance is constantly breaking off the plastic nozzle that goes into your speed triple? How many times have you had to replace the little piece of plastic?
The fuel line fittings.
Yeah,
it has
yeah.
quick release fuel line. Yeah, those
Yeah.
have to be replaced just because they get old and brittle. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
But
on a
only if
bike.
you keep a bike as long as I do. If
You have
hadn't kept it-
106,000 miles on that one now?
113.
113,000 miles.
22-year-old bike.
So
yeah.
Lance and I have an agreement that when he kicks the bucket, I get his speed triple. The problem is he's not dying quick enough, and this bike keeps getting older. So like,
so
Yeah,
hard.
Spurgeon's-
at some point, we got to figure this out.
Spurgeon's been eager for me to die for quite some time now. Yes.
It's only because you're so close to
Oh,
it.
my
I can
God.
taste it.
That's
What do you got? I know
Terribly grim.
you don't ride dirt bikes. So
No, I don't have
what is-
anything intelligent to say about dirt bikes, but I do have some ideas.
You think you have something intelligent to say about
well,
stuff
we'll see.
outside the dirt
We'll
world?
see about that, but I do have a few things that I think are significant from 2019, just for what they represent. And one of those is the Indian FTR 1200, and I don't know yet if that's going to be a significant bike because it depends on whether or not Indian follows through with that. But I've been waiting for a major U.S. motorcycle manufacturer to have the nerve to build something other than a V-twin cruiser, bagger, or a touring bike. And if Indian keeps promising us they're going to do that, Harley's got their own new things in the work. But so far, nobody's gone away from the V-twin. Nobody's really made that step away. They're still clinging to this tradition of just building those kind of bikes. If the FTR turns out to be, we're 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, and we see these other new kinds of motorcycles coming out from Indian, then the FTR will be very significant because it was that first little step in that
Right.
process.
But it's still using a V-twin engine.
It still is, but I'm saying it's at
Just
least a
not a
step
cruiser
away from
style.
cruiser,
Yeah.
bagger, touring bike. That's
Yeah.
all we've seen. It's
Yeah.
even when Polaris started up the Victory brand, that's what they made.
Yeah.
When they bought Indian, that's what they made. It's all Harley has made up until now. I'm waiting for somebody to have the nerve to do something more.
Yeah.
So that I think it is potentially significant if it's the first step towards something lasting. If 3 years down the line, Polaris says, this whole motorcycle thing isn't working out for us, and we're shutting it down like we shut down
Victory?
then it won't be a significant motorcycle.
Well, it's interesting because I actually agree with you, and the FTR 1200S was my pick for this, and I know that Joe loved this bike. When we were out
Man,
testing
that was a
it,
tough call between the speed twin and the FTR was really tough for me to decide.
Yeah, Joe fell in love with that bike instantly because he flew out. I was in Vegas, and I had been riding it in Vegas for 2 days before we rode it out to Arrowhead,
LA.
Lake Arrowhead in California. And we shot the review out there. And Joe didn't want to give it back. Joe was like,
Never
"No,
wanna give the
I'll just
bikes
do the whole
back."
thing. I'll do
Yeah.
the whole review."
Yeah.
And for me, while I appreciated the technology and the styling advancements, and really I appreciate Indian doing something that was so far from their norm, but it just didn't strike me as a bike that like I wanted to go out and buy.
It's not a bike that really speaks to me personally.
Yeah.
I don't love it like Joe
very
does.
fun to ride.
It's fun to ride, but I wasn't sad to give it back.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of it more in terms of it's a potentially significant step.
But
if
I
it
guess
leads
that's
to
my
something.
that's my
Right.
point is that the fact that Indian brought that to market,
Yep.
the fact that they took a chance on something that was very
And it's a
outside
small
of their,
chance.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not that far.
Yeah.
Like
But,
you
I
say,
mean,
it's still a V-twin. It's still traditional styling.
But it
It's
was like
something.
a naked sport bike.
Right,
I mean,
it's
it was
something.
like a very naked standard motorcycle compared
Yeah.
to everything else in their lineup
Right,
currently.
exactly.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, I mean, how many times do we stop at a gas station and not get asked about that bike?
Dude, people would talk to me at traffic lights anytime I was out on the bike. Like they were really blown away, and it was really a fantastic looking bike.
Yeah.
You know, I found myself even every time we parked it and I walked away, like I had to keep looking back at it because it's just, you know, as far as like the history behind the brand and the logo on the tank, the paint job, the overall like colors and style. It just really stood out as a special bike, you know, from the get-go. I think a lot of folks were maybe a little bit bummed that it did come out looking a little bit more like a naked sport bike than a flat tracker.
Yeah, but I mean, so that gripes me too because they did what they had to do to
Right.
get this thing
Yeah.
to perform.
And they offer the tracker kit that was
Right.
easy to put on.
Well, we could sit around and probably talk about an entire episode in the FTR, but
Well, there's one other thing I was going to bring up too. I'll keep it brief, but another thing that I think was significant is the first year of Ducati racing a V4, their flagship superbike. You know, their V4 replaced the V-twin, and there's no company in motorcycling other than Harley-Davidson that was more associated with the V-twin engine architecture than Ducati. That's what they were, V-twins. And so, you know, they already had the Desmos Adichie V4 racing in MotoGP because they had to. There was no way they could possibly be competitive with a V-twin in MotoGP. But for their World Superbike effort, they finally realized, hey, we need a V4 for that too.
Right.
And so they came out with the V4, and so 2019 was the first year of that. And I think that's significant just from the standpoint of a company that's so much identified with this one thing, saying, no, we got to go do this if we're going to succeed.
But you're personally not going to go out and buy it because you don't really have the use for a 200 plus horsepower sport bike on the street.
Look, I can't even ride my Daytona 675 as fast as it'll go. I sure
Right.
can't ride a V4,
It's
a V4R.
bananas. The amount of 200
fast
plus
as it'll go.
horsepower bikes out now just blows my mind.
And I have like we'll get we're working our way to it, but for the 2020 stuff, like some of the stuff that I'm excited to see in 2020 were some of these new bikes that are coming out that are, you know, sport bike oriented, but definitely a little bit more, you know, around the 100 and 115 horsepower range, which I think for the average rider is probably a little bit more attainable. But before we do that, I have the final question on 2019. What are some of the big misses of 2019?
Being an adventure bike guy as well as a dirt guy, I will echo the motorcycle community and say, Yamaha, what the hell, dude? Why didn't the T7 come out this year?
Well, I just sat on it at IMS.
Yeah.
But why can't I walk into a dealership and sit on it yet?
Well, especially since, you know, obviously everyone is online now, and you could see all these reviews and YouTube videos of people in Europe riding the bike, and, you know, they're getting to tune it and tweak it and put some miles on it and really beat it up, which is what it's made for. And then, you know, now we're here, you know, sitting here, a lot of folks had deposits on these bikes, and they're left empty-handed. You know, but I think that, okay, now we know it's going to be $9,999.
And I will say, so
it's incredible value.
And again, we're kind of working into 2020, but like sitting on that bike, seeing that bike in person, really impressive.
Yeah, it's almost like that was Yamaha's apology for it taking so long to come out to the USA. They're like, here is this awesome bike at a pretty ridiculously low price for what it is. But I also really dig the fact that now these manufacturers are starting to see like how rally bikes are really cool. You know what I mean? So we've seen the transition from a lot of like motocross folks going into enduro. We're seeing enduro bikes get much better. You know, they're kind of replacing the dual sport world. So you can have a more serious kind of street, like your bike is a street legal competition enduro bike, which is awesome.
It's true. But I kind of took a street bike and I pulled some stuff off of it.
Well, we're not going to talk about that, so you don't get any trouble.
If the EPA is watching, I did none of that.
But I think the equivalent to that is folks that are into adventure bikes and really using adventure bikes hard, you know, and maybe doing rallies and stuff like that with adventure bikes is the factory option of a rally bike.
I'm gonna stop you because right now we're getting into like trends that I think we're seeing more, especially
you can't
heavily
stop
in
me,
2020.
Spurs. I'm unstoppable.
But so your response for biggest misses of 2019 is that the T7 was not released this year.
Yes.
The thing that is sort of the most mystifying motorcycle that I saw in 2019 has to be the BMW R18/2 concept bike that we just saw at EICMA. Now, if you didn't see that, it was a a concept bike, but it's apparently going to go into production. It's an 1800cc cruiser.
But an 1800cc boxer.
An 1800cc
Giant,
boxer cruiser.
giant.
So so you've got these.
The concept
two,
does look very cool, though.
The concept looks cool, but let's analyze this. Let's break it down. You've got you've got the boxer engine, so you've got these 2 cylinders that are like the size of monstrous killer bee beehives sticking out to both sides.
It's a good way. I thought you were gonna be like a monstrous football, but no, it's a beehive.
No,
is the way
it's
to
like
do
a
it,
bee. Yeah, it's this big fin monstrosity sticking
Just
out
to
to the
bash
side.
your shins.
So I mean, but let's just break it down, Joe. You've got cruisers. Big cruisers are basically sold in the U.S. market. They're dwindling in the U.S. market. I
Right.
mean, even we've seen 5 years of steadily decreasing sales for Harley Davidson, which because that's what they make is big cruisers primarily. Last quarter, we even saw a big drop in sales of Indian cruisers. So it's a U.S. only market. It's a niche market anywhere else. It's a dwindling market, and you've got this probably going to be a pretty expensive bike. Why would you build something that's going to be expensive for a dying niche of consumers? It's small to begin with.
I will see you the R18 Concept, and I will raise you a bike that actually went into production and was released this year, which was the Indian Challenger. So you talk about all these big cruisers and the dwindling sales of the large cruiser market. You look at something like Harley Davidson that is coming out now with the Bronx, with the Livewire concept, the Pan America.
Right.
They're realizing now that they have to differentiate their brand. Indian, who was the first one to do that from the big American V-twin companies, they came out with the FTR 1200 that we were just talking about, and then they followed that up with the Challenger. Like I don't know what that's going to do for them. Like I don't know how many of these folks, and the demographic they're looking at is folks that are a little bit later in life, late 40s, early 50s, that have some disposable income. And a lot of those people I see now gravitating more towards the adventure bike segment. And that's where they're spending their money. So would you not think that the Challenger would be something that is...
I think there's a fundamental difference in that, okay, so the Challenger fills a niche. You're right, it's not a growing niche, but it fills a niche. It advances, I would say, that type of bike in the sense that it looks like it's going to be a really good package. It's probably going to perform well. It's going to be a good touring bike. So for those who want a touring bike that has that look, that traditional look to it, I think it's an attractive option.
Okay.
On the other hand, with the R18, the most traditional bunch of buyers in the world are big cruiser buyers. They won't buy anything that's not a V-twin anyway. So here you're trying to sell this big boxer engine to a bunch of guys who are only going to buy V-twins to begin with. They're probably not going to buy a German. I mean, does anybody? I think what happened is the guys who were involved in the original R1200C. Anybody remember when the BMW came out with the R1200C? I think all the people who worked on that.
Yeah, we all wish we could. Right. We all wish we could forget it.
I got to believe what happened is all the people who worked on that project at BMW have now retired, and so nobody's around that still has the post-traumatic stress disorder from
dealing with
disaster.
That.
Right. So there's nobody left who personally experienced that disaster.
I've seen some of those in the road. I mean, people bought them.
Yeah.
A few people bought them.
Yeah.
But I mean.
But I guess if this concept comes
weird.
out and it's $30,000 and they sell 700 of them,
Honestly,
does that
I
cover
think
the tooling?
that bike is aimed at the folks that are maybe looking at the Triumph Bobber. You know what I mean? So it's somebody who maybe is a young person who's kind of burned out on the cafe world, but wants a factory custom looking bike.
Yeah.
So I think if they stayed as true as possible to the R18 concept, it might be a win for that crowd, even though it's a very, very small group of folks.
Exactly. I think that's going to be one of these bikes that you sell the first 25 of them really fast at full MSRP, and after that they sit on the showrooms.
Well, I mean, look at when BMW released the HP4 Race. They released a track-only bike that didn't have a plate, and I rode it. It was a amazing machine, but it was like $72,000. And
is that all?
And then they only made 750 of them, but
Right.
they couldn't even sell the 750 that they made. I mean, they were definitely those bikes sitting on dealership floors at a deep discount.
Yeah.
So, but enough looking back at 2019. Let's take a look to the future.
Whoa.
So, question 4. What are some of the things, and actually I've got so many answers for this question, so I'm hoping you guys can maybe answer some of these first for us, and then I'll just fill in the blanks because there's so much stuff that I am excited about for 2020. But what are some of the things that we saw at EICMA, at IMS, for 2020 that we or you, the collective, the royal we, are excited about?
I was really digging that the Husqvarna Norden.
Oh my God.
Just because I really dig the fact that some of these like 90s retro bikes are coming back, and that bike has kind of that 90s retro vibe to it.
First of all, that was a concept. That wasn't a bike that we're actually going to see released in
Yeah, but
2020.
Husky makes moves. I think Husky could pull through and make something out of it. And
You
they need to
ride adventure bikes off-road. Look at that bike. All it has is all this weight up top. It's got crash bars on the rally tower.
Dude, it's no different than our Tigers. You know,
Yes,
the
it
Tiger
is.
is
It's going to
so
be
top
so
heavy.
much weight up top. It's going to be. There's no way. Why would you not just buy a 790?
Because the
not buy
790, as awesome as it is, it has a look about it that only a mother can love.
So you sound like Lance. The two of you and
Hey,
only buying.
I knew when this topic came up, all I was going to have to do is sit here and push the start button and let you two run because I knew this was going to be your
adventure bike conversation?
portion of the program. I'm just going to watch.
No, I mean, I do agree that the 790 is a killer bike, and I really dig how KTM's really hip to the fact that you got to get the weight on a heavy bike that you're going to take off-road. You have to carry the weight low for it to be rideable in any which way.
The Norden looks like it's carrying 30 pounds up top. And you're excited about that. You sound just like the internet. Oh man, this bike looks so cool.
It does look cool. You can't deny it. It looks super awesome. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of rad stuff coming out, but that one stood out to me as something that really piqued my interest.
Outside of the adventure world, Mr. Oliver.
Yeah, switch to totally the opposite end of the world. Things I'm interested in seeing in 2020. You know, we saw the new Honda CBR 1000 RR-R.
So many R's.
Three
Fireblade SP to give the full unabridged name.
Wild.
So it's got
RRR
now with 33% more R's, as I wrote in my article about it. It's the pirate edition. It's the RRR. And there's been so many jokes
I hope
already.
that catches on.
There's
yeah.
been so many jokes already. I mean, but the key is, I'm excited to see. I don't know, but I'm excited to see if it will or will not turn out to be significant for Honda's racing efforts. Because one of the things that I find hard to explain over recent years is, you know, Honda dominates in MotoGP. They dominate in racing. They have a history of dominating in racing wherever they go. But they're literally just trying to finish in the top 10 in World Superbike. And so I'm interested to see if this bike is going to give them a competitive platform in Superbike racing. And they went out and they hired Alvaro Bautista. So they're spending money.
So I saw the CBR in person. It looks amazing.
It does look
It
amazing.
looks amazing.
I hope it puts them
Does
back at the
something
front
for them,
because
yeah.
we've got, you know, Kawasaki has a competitive, obviously been winning World Superbike. Ducati's up front. Yamaha's getting closer and closer. We just need, you know,
But I
Honda.
do think from a looks perspective, from a sales floor perspective of walking into a dealership floor, you know, take the racing aspect out of it, that bike looks really hot,
Yeah.
especially if you compare it next to some of the bikes that might be a little bit longer in the tooth at this point. You know, even the Suzuki, while it is relatively new, it does not look nearly as attractive as the Honda does.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the sport bikes now, the leader bikes out there, you've got really Ducati with, in my opinion, one of the sexiest bikes. But now I think Honda, where the old CBR had gotten kind of like, you know, it definitely is now much sexier to look at.
And another thing we saw at EICMA that I know you were interested in too, and I'm also interested in from the racing aspect, was the Aprilia RS660.
660,
Yeah,
yeah.
dude, that thing is really cool.
It is
Looks
cool.
beautiful.
It's a twin instead of a four, but that bike to me has really great potential in something like in Moto America racing here in the United States.
Yes.
The Twins Cup. I mean, right now people are out there racing in that class primarily on old SV650s and MT's 07s.
Yeah.
And the advantage of that is people have been racing those bikes for years now, and they know how to dial them in, they know how to
Yeah,
modify
a
them,
lot
they
of
know how to set them up.
aftermarket.
So you've got a big advantage in terms of the knowledge base. But that Aprilia, I mean, it has the potential right out of the box
Right.
to be as good as these bikes that have been developed.
I was talking to Shane, who works for Piaggio Group, works
Yeah,
for Aprilia,
yeah.
and that was his argument, was that he was like, I think that this bike right out of the box
Yeah.
will be able to take a production built race machine. And I was actually there with Ari Henning, and he was just like, I don't know, because Ari races,
Yeah.
you know, a lot, and he was just like, I don't know, man, that's a challenge. So I
Yeah,
was like,
it is.
and I was like, that's a challenge, and like I will take that article on Common Tread, right? Like you take Ari Henning,
Yeah.
you give him an RS 660, and let him go race, you know, against a cup bike. I think would be an interesting comparison to make.
Yeah.
But like, I like that bike. Again, taking the racing out of it. You look at the 660. They're claiming like a little over 100 horsepower at the crank, which means rear wheel horsepower, probably about 80, 85 rear wheel horsepower. And then you throw that in like the Tuono.
Yeah.
And like, what an amazing street bike.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like the problem that I have, I love the Ducati Street Fighter. That came out, or that we saw that coming out for 2020, and that's
Right.
one of the ones that I would love to see. But it's just, it's too
bananas.
much. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
it's
too
totally
much power.
bananas.
I would much rather have something like, you know, I talk about my old VFR a lot. I know when you and I, Lance, I'm looking at you, talk about like what we're looking for out of a sport touring machine. That's definitely one that like, if I could harness that level of power, but put it in something a little bit sleeker,
Yeah.
a little bit slimmer,
Yeah.
a little bit more modern. So when I'm looking at something like a 660 P-twin, probably is going to have some good torque to it, but real world
yeah.
power, that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think the parallel twin in that format, you know, with that amount of power, you know, it's going to make a great sound. You know, it's going to be easy to ride. It's going to have low center of gravity. That bike really, you know, like turned my crank. You know, that I haven't really had any sport bikes like really make me think about considering getting one to ride, and that 660 really turned me on.
So the other thing to note too is, you know, the new 900s that BMW is putting out. I think that seeing them in person did a lot for me. Looking at the new 900s, seeing the price point as like $89.99 for the 900R. Now, don't get me wrong, BMW will figure out a way to add $3,000 to that by the time you get out of the dealership. But you know, I think that you're looking at something that's going to be, you know, a pretty decent bike to start off with. Also, the other thing, just kind of wrapping up that question, is the new Harley-Davidson Bronx.
Yeah.
You know, I think Harley's been getting a lot of flack over the past couple of years. When I look at the Bronx, it's what so many people are asking for. It's a traditional-looking motorcycle, and you know, I know that you don't like these new Transformer things. We've had enough, you know, ad nauseum conversations. I know we talked about in the comments about the MT10. But like, that's a sport bike that's going to make 115 horsepower, they're claiming, and it's got a really cool upright naked look. It's got classic styling, so I think that's going to be a big winner for the brand if they can price it correctly.
Exactly. It all comes down to that.
Yeah. So the final question 5.
Wow,
We got
made it.
here.
We made
You
it
made
all the way here.
Lance, how you feeling?
I'm hanging in there.
Yeah. Your first day. You look really excited. Your passion is showing.
Trying not to leap off the couch in total emotion here. Doing my best.
What is something that you didn't see slated for 2020, but you'd really like to see in the near future?
The thing was, when we started putting these notes together for this show, the Tiger 900 hadn't been mentioned yet. It didn't really have a release date. So, you know, at that time when we were prepping for this, I had only seen a couple teaser pictures and a couple videos of the new Tiger 900, which is ironically kind of a throwback to a 90s Tiger. So, you know, Triumph usually throws back to their 60s bikes, but now they're throwing back to their own 90s bikes.
I don't know if they're throwing back.
I know,
think
it's
it's
like
just the
an
same
accident. Yeah, it's the
displacement
same
size, because
displacement.
like they're saying that this is going to be like a rally now,
Yeah.
and like.
Well, I think that's what's cool. You know, I'm seeing the same thing with the new the Tiger 900. They had mentioned that they're going to have the Rally and the GT. So Grand Tourer was going to be decked out with, you know, bags, I assume, or crash protection lights.
Maybe
and things
taller
like that.
windshield?
Something like that. And also, I noticed that the Africa Twin now, their updated version has a similar format. So they have their Adventure ES versus the traditional Africa Twin. So I think now these brands, you know, are starting to see like, hey, some people are really doing some aggressive stuff with their adventure bikes off-road, and some people just want a really cool looking sport touring bike.
Well, it's interesting with the Africa Twin, right? Because they left the base model as the more off-roady version, and then the fancier model is actually more for like street touring and comfort, you know?
Yeah, but I'm excited for the Tiger 900 to come out because obviously, you know, like I have mine as a 12. I just rode an 18. I think I just rode an 18. It was a really similar bike, you know, aside from a couple of the creature comforts being updated, it was really the same bike. It's still a fantastic bike, but I'm anxious to see the next generation.
But again, that's kind of cheating because we know that's coming out in 2020 at this point. So I need something that, what is something we want to see coming out in 2020 that we don't already have?
Well, I know what I would like to see, and I didn't expect to see it in 2020. I hope to see it someday. I hope to live long enough to see it someday. Is
I don't, because I want that speed triple
You
really
don't,
badly.
but I
It's
just
stop with that.
Very
But-
morbid.
I think, and this goes back to the discussion we had earlier about the FTR being potentially the first step towards new kinds of motorcycles coming from U.S. manufacturers. The one bike I always thought would be great would be new Indian 4. Now, anyone who knows history of the Indian brand knows that they had a 4-cylinder motorcycle back. They were one of the first to build a 4-cylinder motorcycle, and it was their aspirational bike. It was like the sophisticated bike, when everybody else had V twins. And I don't see why Indian can't tap into that heritage, come out with an
want it to be a
inline
sport
4
bike?
No, I want it to be a touring bike.
You want it to be an inline,
I want it to be what
Have
the
you seen
Challenger
the
is.
bike?
Yeah,
Have you
I've seen the original ones.
So yeah, the original ones that they have the 4-cylinder, not across the frame but in line with the frame, and which would be perfect for a touring bike. Like if they had the Challenger with an inline 4 lined up with a frame, shaft drive, because it's perfect for shaft drive in that configuration,
Right.
just like the old BMW bricks.
The flying brick.
Yeah, I think that would be something that simultaneously tapped into the true heritage of Indian, and would be something that is totally different from what any U.S. manufacturer.
But you want them
right
to
now.
call it the flying brick. You want them to steal that from BMW.
No, I don't. I want them to call it the Indian 4 because that's what it was.
I think the only thing working against them if they do that would be the fact that it wouldn't sound like a V-twin. So the early Indian 4 sound, it's very, very smooth. Like it almost sounded like a modern 4-cylinder bike.
I think there's a lot working against them in doing that. I don't think they honestly have the nerve to do it. I wish they did. But
It would be
Joe,
really cool.
look at this. You're saying it works against them with those guys who want V-twins. Well, the way that U.S. manufacturers are going to survive if they start appealing to different people. Yeah. They can't just rely on selling to those people who, it's got to be a potato V-twin. Because that's great. You sell bikes to those people, I'm saying, keep serving that audience, but that audience is not growing. That audience is phasing out of motorcycling. And having something that would draw people away from buying a Goldwing, the Goldwing, we saw that go lighter. We saw it go towards hopefully more appealing to younger buyers.
Right.
Well, what would an Indian 4 do? I'm not saying stop making V-twins by any means, but give that option.
Yeah, it would be a cool option.
I would love to see something new from American manufacturers.
You know what's interesting is that I had a conversation with Colin over at Honda, and he was talking about the success that they've had with the DCT transmissions, and they were really expecting it to be like a, speaking of the Goldwing specifically, because you mentioned that bike, but like looking at, they were expecting, I think, 20 to 30% of the buyers would be DCT buyers, and then the other 70% would go traditional. And they said it was almost a flip of that. Where the majority of people are looking for a DCT bike, not a traditional, manual transmission, which was very surprising to me. I think that for me, the bike that there's two bikes that I would want to see in 2020. One, Ducati, that Desert X concept that came out, much like you were all excited about the.
Yeah, I don't understand how you could like that bike and hate the Norden.
Norden. Did not care for the Norden, but the Desert X concept.
You're crazy.
I very much think that looks svelte, looks aggressive.
Did you see it from the side or did you only see the front?
I saw it from like this crazy 3/4 angle.
Yeah, look at it. There's a profile pic going around, and the ass end of it is so weird. So.
I don't know. Right now, I'd like to see that. But the one thing that I would like to see that hasn't even been hinted at would be I want Triumph to take the 765 engine that we saw re-released and revamped in a new RS Street Triple, and I want it in a sport touring package. I don't want some upright Tracer GT from Yamaha looking sport tourer. I don't want Tiger 1050 sport tourer. I want a sport bike sport tourer leaning to the sports side.
So you
some
want
hard
a
bags.
955i Sprint ST?
No, I want like a 1050.
That's pretty
I want
much.
like a 1050 Sprint ST,
Yeah.
but smaller, sleeker,
it's lighter.
aggressive.
Yeah,
Right.
I know you would buy one. I'd buy one.
That's my use case right there. That's what I would use. Yeah.
But you will buy it, correct? You're gonna go on record right now saying you're gonna buy the bike.
That would be pretty tempting. Yeah.
See, pretty tempting. That's
he'd be
almost a
tempted.
guaranteed check in your inbox, Mr. Triumph. So I think that's going to pretty much do it. We scratched the surface. We got about 25% of what we can expect to see for 2020. We could probably
maybe.
sit here and talk for another 75% of the exciting motorcycles out there, but we need to leave something for you to talk about in the comments section below.
Right. If you guys, for some reason, need more of this, whatever it is, make sure you go to wherever you get your podcasts and type in RevZilla. You'll see Highside, Lowside, all the different episodes have different folks that we had interviewed, including our boy Lance here. So be sure to check that out and leave some comments because we also dive into your comments in our podcast.
I like that you're like, whatever it is. Like, we haven't figured out what this is yet.
No, we haven't.
If you like more of whatever this is,
2
make
years.
sure you can go on and get more of it on the podcast. But that is going to wrap it up for now. Make sure you join us back on the couch for the next episode when Lem returns and we discuss whether or not 2020 is the best time to purchase a new or used motorcycle. For Mr. Lance Silverfox Oliver, catch him on Common Tread. Bearded Joe, I'm Spurge. Enjoy the ride.